Thank you not because you're here, but also that it is so important that we have a scientific base on what we try to achieve when we try to lobby with politicians and stakeholders, that we are at least have the real facts, objective facts that we can use. So this is not my last slide, this is my first slide, of course, to thank you. Thank you all the scientists across the world, because we need you. And of course, what I try to do in my job, locally and internationally, is try to translate your science into a language that those people who make decisions can understand, and hopefully, let's say, evolve in a more sustainable world in the future. Well, that's where we talk. I will talk a little bit about everything. I will try to educate you and then zoom in into the national park, of course. And it will last approximately about an hour, I think. But I have beautiful pictures if I don't speak that good, so don't care. The pictures are good. So, but the focus is, of course, the globe, the planet, the Million Stars hotel we live in. And for those who are really good in mapping things, they know that we are now more or less there on the planet. The other thing that is so important if we talk about biodiversity, wildlife, ecosystem, climate change, whatever, is the communication. We need to communicate in a way that, let's say, the other people can understand where we're talking to. And I don't know if people in this room already know this picture, because this picture was, I think, 7 or 8 years ago, was world news, front page news. Because what happened was, this is a picture out of the UK. UK is in the news all the day now with Brexit, you know. But you know, when you do things in Wales, it must be bilingual. So, and there was a guy working from the traffic agency in London who had to make a new signpost with no entry for heavy good vehicles, and he just did an email to his colleague in Wales and said, "Can you translate that to me? Because I have to put it on both languages." So this was then at the end the result. And it was world news. And it was world news because of this. He got the automatic answering machine answer. So it's there. Huh? I am not in the office at the moment. Send any work to be translated. So the way we communicate with each other is, yeah, let's say, important. The other thing, of course, is that we need to watch, to take a glance at the globe, what is going on, because I think when we talk for sure about biodiversity, that biodiversity, like climate change, are symptoms of a bigger problem. That's a systemic problem that we have. So what I would like to do with you is to go a little bit into that big problem that we have, and then say how that we can, let's say, find solutions with biodiversity, with ecosystems, to help the world forward. I'm also a member of the Club of Rome, for those older people. But in 1972, it was, let's say, the big start of the environmental movement, at least for sure in Europe, but also in the United States. For sure, it was a kind of a mechanism that started that movement of revitalized the movement, which, of course, was a simple message: there are limits to growth. And there was a lot of debate over the past years about that, but I think now 4 or 5 years ago it was reviewed, and the conclusion was that 83% of what was stated in 1972 was correct. So even if you know what the future will be, you're not always successful, because it's always, people tell, if you know the future will be successful, not in this case. Because of let's say, a package of things that happened over the, let's say, years. And one of the big problems we face, is, of course, population growth. We know that we are near to 8 billion people across on this planet, and the question is, can we live in balance, in harmony with, let's say, our heritage, our natural heritage as well, our ecosystems as well. And of course, if you're lucky, you live in an apartment or a beautiful, let's say, region. But if you're less lucky, you live in less interesting places to live, and maybe you just have no home. So the question is, how do we try to find a balance where everyone on Earth has a good life to live? And if we look in the predictions based on the Sustainable Development Goals, then you see that the water and the energy and the food that we need in 2030 will increase incredibly. For water, we need 40% more water. Most obvious, you know that. Energy plus 40%, food between 30 and 50%. How to deal with that and still live in harmony with our planet? And the other thing is, of course, that we travel a lot, if we are a lot. Because I think in China, only in China, I think 2 million people every year come in a position that they can travel long distance. So the question is how to deal with that. And tourism is a big word, of course. I think that the tourism of the future will be sustainable tourism, or will be not called tourism anymore. I hope so. But you see that tourism is a big economic machine where it's 10% of the global GDP. But on the other hand, there are lots of troubles that the footprint of tourism is incredibly high. The question is, this is also not in balance with each other. Barcelona, tourism is an invasion. We see that also in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in certain places, that we see too many people coming to these beautiful places, and it's not excluded to cities, but it's also related to big, beautiful hotspots of wildlife, also in Europe. Cinque Terre in Italy is a good example to talk about maybe later with a beer or whatever, but there are several places also in Europe where we have this problem in nature areas. And how we organized our, let's say, society is also questionable. All these greenhouses to grow tomatoes. The question is this the right way to do so? Just think about this. Is this? And if we eat meat, is this the farm we think of? In Belgium, we don't see this. We think that there is a meadow and a few cows and a pig. But this is how most of our meat is produced. The question is this in balance? Can we still work on this model? Of course, we need to have some nature, like New York. And also, this is an economic, interesting model, because if you buy an apartment with the view on the park, it's double the price than when you look at the opposite side. So it's interesting to see these, let's say, these interesting, let's say, connections with nature, almost none left, and still has a high economic value. It's also the same in national parks. In national parks, in the surroundings of the national parks, the price of the housing is increasing between 7 and 15% at approximately 400 meters from the borders of a national park. So what we did over the past decades is we spent billions of dollars to find life on other places, but we spent trillions of dollars killing life on this one. It's like it is, or not. So if I have to symbolize our economic system to date, where the sky is the limit, and you would say that we keep on piling up our containers higher and higher and higher to have more profit, you feel already what will be the result. And I can predict the result. If we go forth with our current economic system, this will happen. Economy will take over and we will lose our ecosystem. And the only thing we can do, and that's why we're here for, I think, for part of it, of course, is to invest again in our ecological system. As Americans, you have to know this, maybe. Someone who recognized this picture? This is Livermore, city in the state of California, where a beautiful story happened. And it is more, let's say, a kind of a mechanism that we used over more than 100 years how to organize our economic system. Edison, you know, Mr. Edison, he found light in 1879, and very soon after, beautiful, fantastic engineers, they they developed the light bulb. This is a light bulb that is put in California, in the city of Livermore, and they switched on the light in 1901, and the light is still burning, day and night. Already 4 webcams were broken, because it has to, you can see it on Google if you want to. But what happened? Let's say the producers of the light bulbs, they said, this is a real nasty economic model, because we cannot sell too much light bulbs then if they last so long. So we just gather together with all the producers of light bulbs, and it's called the Phoebus Conspiracy, and we make an agreement to make light bulbs that can give light, can last for only 1,000 hours. And then they need to break. They need to keep you in the dark. And those who try to make light bulbs who can last longer, they have to pay a fine. It's in the history books. But that's how we organized our economic model for many, many decades. So new is almost broken. New is waste. New today is history tomorrow, and new is a desire. And we need to shift from that. So, and that's where I come back to later in my talk, where we have to find a new solution, and it's there already. It's called the circular economy or the performance economy. But this is something that we worked with for so many decades now, and we know that it is a failing system. So, okay. We have, let's say, population growth, economic system, tourism within the economic system, or let's say the way we organize ourselves. The other thing is, of course, and you know maybe not much more than me about it, is our climate change, is greenhouse gases and how they behave. Luckily, I'm an ambassador for Al Gore as well, so this is the graph I always use, where they can really drill ice in Greenland of an age of 800,000 years until now, and they can measure what the carbon dioxide was in the atmosphere at that time. So you see there's a graph with the parts per million going up and down between 220, let's say, and almost 300. That's what people say. It's going up and down, it's going up and down. Beautiful thing is that at the same moment, they can also measure the temperature at the time. So the beautiful thing, what we see here, is that there is a correlation between the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the temperatures. If they go up, temperatures go up. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But we are here now. So the question is, what happens now and here? And that's what we know also. That's where we were in 2013 with greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And if we don't take care of it, we will still increase and really grow up to 600. We are now in Hawaii, where it is measured, is now about 420 parts per million. The question is, of course, what will happen here? And if you think about the climate agreement of Paris, with far below 2 degrees, 1.5 degrees, that's, let's say, the basis for that, because this is the danger. Pictures, I can choose wherever I would like to. You see pictures of hurricane. Yeah, you know them, of course, in North America as well. And where you are from? Turkey, 45 degrees Celsius in 2017. Yeah, this is very recent, of course, with Dorian. Yeah, Anchorage in 2017. Polar bears need to be there. You know, these kind of things. And of course, this brings climate migration. Climate migration is a big problem, for sure, also in Europe. And, this is just in Dutch there. We expect there 200 million climate refugees in 2050. 200 million people who needs to move because of climate change. Yeah, biodiversity is a beautiful thing, and ecologic systems are a beautiful thing. And what you see is, of course, that not only some species get having problems, but also viruses are really spreading out now. Dengue virus, Zika virus, West Nile virus is going really across the planet. No, there's also, let's say, a disadvantage of climate change. And the world is burning. Next Saturday, for those who are still here in Belgium on Saturday, I do a big campaign in Antwerp for saving the Amazon, together with my friends, and to get support out of Belgium and Europe to save the Amazon, because it is burning and there is no water for every species on Earth, of course. This is a picture of Beijing in, I think it was 2015, okay, where the picture gives a view how the sky should look like, and where the real situation is the opposite. 2015. Unbelievable, but true. And the reason for all these problems are we. We are causing these problems, and the question is, if we are conscious about that, maybe we can find solutions. And be confident, I'm a positive guy. I have solutions with me as well, of course. But so the big, let's say, objective is, can we switch off from our addiction of, say, carbon dioxide? I could talk a lot about that more, but I don't do that because otherwise I will talk too long. So, climate change. And then the topic where you know more about than me. I'm an herpetologist and did some research years and years ago, but biodiversity, what's on stake there? I think most of you came in by airplane. So this is an airplane, and an average airplane that takes people on board has approximately 6,000 parts and 4,000 screws to make an airplane. Now imagine that just before stepping on the plane, when the voice in the airport said, "Oh, please take your passport and your boarding pass because we will start to board. But before you step on the plane, we have one important information for you, and it is we are missing 4 parts and 3 screws." The question is then, will you step on the plane? Most of us, I think, won't step on the plane. But if we look at our, let's say, our natural engine, our ecosystem, where approximately every 20 minutes is getting a screw extinct, a species extinct, we don't care too much. At least a lot of people, we do care, and that's why we are here. But this is the situation. We have so beautiful protected areas, wildlife places, biodiversity hotspots, national parks, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, far away, nearby, big, small, beautiful species like night shark, kingfisher, whatever. But we think it's always there. And it is really getting extinct. Every species is under threat. A lot of species, you know that better than me. 75% of the populations are really downsizing at the moment. We are really cutting the lungs out of our planet. And with the trees, we also, let's say, destroy the species who live in and on it. Same with our oceans and the plastic soup. I don't go too far with that, but we see the same problems there. Question is how to deal with that. And of course, and that's related to climate change of the IPCC, that not all the species can really rapidly change into their new situation where they're in to warm and to get to speed up. A tree has no legs to move, of course, and when you can move easily, you have a little bit more success than other species. I don't know if you know, but losing forests and the problem related to climate change and carbon dioxide is a bigger problem than all the mobility together at the globe. And there lies also the biggest opportunity for, I think, a solution that we still have. Ola, something happens here. Okay, shut down. Huh? That we still have an opportunity to really replant, regrow big forests in certain places on Earth, and to make, let's say, a leapfrog forward in the problematic, dangerous climate change situation we are in. So biodiversity, although it isn't a big issue at the political side, in Europe and also in other continents, it is crucial for our life. If you really put ecosystem biodiversity away, I think we don't have too long time to survive. So we need to think how to deal with that. And we need to make sure that we really don't make a gap, that all the connections are still there. That's our, let's say, your job to do the scientific research on that. My job is to translate that, and then the society and, let's say, every part of the society then is needed to really make these connections work again. Because there is a big task here, and I would like to make this example. I don't want to happen that to anybody of you, but suggest that you, or imagine that you drive home and just around the corner you see your house burning. So the first thing you do is, what is 991? What is it in the United States? 991. But then you never say, I want you to come to extinguish my house for half. Because then your house will burn down. So the big problems we are facing today with biodiversity, with climate change, is so serious that we can't do half. We cannot say, oh, we do the job half. Because if we don't do it completely, it will really take us down. So doing it by half is not good enough. It's like someone who has lung cancer because of smoking say, well, just smoke a cigarette of 10, it's enough. Don't smoke 50 cigarettes a day. Oh, yeah, and you need to stop. It's the same thing that we need to do. The other conclusion, of course, is that climate change and biodiversity are two sides of the same coin. They are in a relationship with each other, and it's up how we deal with it, how we come to solutions. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm an ambassador for Al Gore, and I'm also currently the president of Europark Federation, which is the largest network on protected areas in Europe, in pan-Europe, not in the EU, but in the entire Europe. We are having members in 37 countries and covering 40 million hectares, which is approximately 8% of the European surface. And we represent 40% of Natura 2000. Natura 2000 is, let's say, the green belt of nature, high-value nature in Europe. Okay, we had the problems. Now the solutions. Are there solutions? Sometimes you can be confused, or what is the way we would like to go forward? Are we disoriented? What is the way we choose? This is not a good way, I think, to take the solutions and to find solutions. Although maybe there's a lot of wildlife there as well, micro wildlife, but this is not a solution, I think. Yeah, he must be there, huh? The question is, yeah, but because if there will always be politicians who think differently from, let's say, us. The question is how to deal with that. It's not that simple. It's sometimes very complicated. And some people say it's impossible. But I would like to think about the possibility of changing. I would like to think about shaping a beautiful future where young people, old people, children, babies can have at least the idea, and hopefully also in real time, that they can have a beautiful, sustainable future. And the thing is that maybe international collaboration is one of these solutions, because in Chile they have thought about a problem that we cannot find a solution for. The connections that we can make is really interesting. I can speak a little bit out of experience, and sometimes it really helps to find new ways of looking to things, new solutions, where we talk together, and we do that in an international network with the right language, of course. Huh? Yeah. And of course, at the highest level, it happens also. We have United Nations, we have the World Economic Forum. If you look into the agendas of the last 15, 20 years of all these big machines, all these big political machines, global machines, then you see that sustainability, climate change, wildlife, biodiversity are increasingly growing to the top. And that's why we have a system change. It is a problem. These are symptoms of a bigger problem, and at least now they start to see that this is the problem. Not far enough, not up speed, but at least we are evolving in that direction. And that's why the Sustainable Development Goals are agreed in 2015 in New York, where the system change and what we have is one of the main topics to achieve. Luckily, we have real fantastic scientists in the past, like Charles Darwin, who were so, let's say, brave and so smart that they could start to explain how life on Earth is organized. Sex and food, as a summary. But at the next stage of that is that we need to shift now from ego to eco, because we thought for several decades in some parts of the planet, at least our parts of the planet, also North America, that we were on top of the system, but we are just part of the system. So, and that's the shift we need to make now. And that's why we are here for that. We need some, let's say, scientific proof that it is better, and there is there. And we have some great characters. We have some great figures like John Muir, Alfred Toepfer in Europe, Dian Fossey. We have so beautiful people who are examples where we can really look up to and say, let's try to go to that direction. If you are a shaman, or if you are a professor, there is another thing to click. You could be the start of that change we need. You have to. It's your responsibility, I think, that every one of us has to have this responsibility, at least try to do the best he can. You can do it in your street, you can do it in your community, you can do it on a country level, at the European level, at the world level, but please, take some initiative here. And maybe we have to follow nature design. Nature-based solutions is a smart, I think, one-liner of IUCN. We follow nature's design in Europark, but this is so, we have research and development of more than 4 billion years. Why don't we use that as a driver for positive change? And what you see now that the economic system starts to turn. We are talking about the natural capital. We have the donut economy that is from the Oxford University brought forward. So beautiful that it is interesting. And the change is happening at the moment, still at the, let's say, below the table, but it will grow very fast, where new is almost never broken, where new is food for new products, where new is today is stable tomorrow, and where new is a desirable need. This is the change what is now about to happen, the performance economy. We will not buy a new car, we will buy mobility. So imagine with this example that you say, I would like to have 200,000 kilometers mobility. Then Ford or whatever brand will say, I hope he can do it with one car. Because if he has to give you 3 or 4 cars to make this mobility agreement, it is a cost. So everything will turn around. This is what we need. This is what is happening nowadays. The first examples are there. Schiphol Airport started with that on the lightning in Schiphol. So it is about to appear. Yeah. Make the earth great again. And we need to leapfrog. We need to be fast, because the window of opportunities, the window that we have to find solutions, is very tight. We need to cut greenhouse gases by half in 11 years from now. It is a tremendous task that we have. So we need to leapfrog. I'm so lucky that I could speak with him 2 times in my life. And I think he has found a solution, Edward O. Wilson, where he stated that we need to safeguard half the planet, half Earth, to at least safeguard 85% of biodiversity of species on our planet. And this is something that is easy to communicate. We need half Earth to give us life. So it starts with education. It starts at a very, let's say, young age that we need to educate our children with living together with wildlife. I can imagine that in North America or in Chile, it is kind of different when you live in the rainforest than we in Europe, and for sure in Northwest Europe, where it is very densely populated. We need to reconnect again with wildlife. And the other beautiful thing is that at several points in time in the past, we see young people come up the stage. Often women, girls. Who remembers Severin Suzuki in 1992 at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, who said, "It is not what you say, big politicians, world leaders. It is what you do." For those who are from Canada, she's an activist now in Canada. And now we have another one, Greta Thunberg, who says, "I want you to panic. Failure means disaster." And again, it brings a new movement. It brings people together and say, "Hey, let's try to follow." Of course, there's a lot of debate. There are also protesters of these ideas. But this, at least now we have a debate where we never had with Al Gore, for instance. I'm an ambassador for Al Gore. Did a tremendous job. It was the start of the change. But these kind of impulses are fantastic, are really key for making big steps ahead to leapfrog. So, how we do that? How can we change the system in just a small period of time? What I try to do and to tell to European leaders and world leaders is that we have done it so many times before. And then they stare to me and say, "Yeah, we did it before." And I try to give some examples. This is the first Ford car, Ford T. Now, do you think that it was due to the Ford T that the automobile industry was so successful or became so successful? Or Porsche or whatever brand? No. It was because of governments, because they constructed roads. Ford didn't construct roads. Government said, "Oh, let's construct roads and then we create mobility and people can start, we can buy cars." Airports, the same thing. It's not KLM or whatever, let's say, a big air company that built an airport. No, it were governments. They said, "Let's do that, let's connect." And an entire industry started. So if we need to shift now to our renewables, the governments of the world are crucial. Together with us, of course, together with the entrepreneurs, together with the industry, but they make the regulations. It's crucial. And they did it before. We know now, also economically, it is calculated that it is even increasing, growing. It results in a growing economy, although I think the word growth will be a bad word in 10 years' time from now. Again, referring to the United States, maybe we need a new moonshot, where President Kennedy once in 1961 said, "I want to have a man on the moon." And 8 years later, there was a man on the moon. In 8 years' time, we were capable of doing that. So it is possible to leapfrog if we want it and if we have a lot of supporters to do so. Some examples? New York, 1900. Yeah, don't see that too good, but all carriages with horses, one car. 1913, just 2 carriages with horses again. So in 13 years' time, we had a shift. Sure, unbelievable. So we are coming, I will tell you a little bit later, all these coal mines to our renewable energy, windmills, parks, and so on and so forth, it is growing tremendously fast. You cannot imagine how fast this is going. Although Trump is still trying to support the coal mines, they will lose because of the economic price of coal is more expensive than renewables. Fossil fuels, the shift into electric cars. Yeah, you have a big Elon Musk there as a big example. We need to give air again in a few years' time. This is what we need to do. We need to find new solutions, how we go for holidays and how we travel, where we go. Beautiful opportunities for wildlife as well. We came across the problem of ozone. We closed the ozone problem. In a few years' time, it's possible. And for those people who have children, you say, oh, they're always looking to their smartphone. I can really assure you, nothing happened over time. It's still us. This was the Pope, waiting for the Pope in 2005. You see, nothing special, but it was 2013. Everybody had a smartphone then. Again, in a few years' time, we were even able to make a shift to shoot the big five into shooting it with pictures. A dentist in the United States maybe still shooting them with a gun, but we are capable of really make this transition. So these are, I have a lot of more of these, let's say, examples, but it is possible to leapfrog in a short period of time to something which is more sustainable. So a beautiful new earth shot maybe is needed for our planet, where we give life to the dead, where we try to revitalize our planet, where we give something back, where we take responsibility, although we are not causing the problem all the time. That's what we need to do. We need to have, let's say, leadership. We need to have collaboration. We need to have partnership, stakeholdership, whatever. We need to have new tools because everything needs to change, because we have a system change. So it is interesting to see that also for young people today, that it is possible to change, because everything, we need to rethink everything. We now are, let's say, going to that circular economy, from linear to circular. We need to think in wholes instead of parts. We need to collaborate. All these things are new, and there are more than that, but we need to invent them. It's up to you. That's also, let's say, a beautiful, let's say, objective for young people. Sometimes we need to think, look back, and maybe we have solutions we didn't take too many time for to see whether this is a solution, but it's a big solution, I think. Although we call it differently, and we still think that we need electricity to dry our laundry. Things like that we need to find, because I'm lucky that every now and then I'm in the ability to talk with Nobel Prize winners, and they all say, we know the problem, we know the solutions, but we are not doing it. For instance, 1 hour of sunshine, if we could cover that, is enough for our entire world for 1 year electricity. 1 hour, 1 year electricity for the entire world. So theoretically, the solution is there. We need to find now a way how to make this happen. We see also at the country level, like here India, 66 million trees in 12 hours. Unbelievable. Why do they do that? Because they think they need to. China is the same thing. China has now agreed a project where 60,000 soldiers will plant 4,000 square kilometers of trees by the end of this year, the size of Ireland. Why are they making these decisions? Because they know the problem now. They feel the problem, so they need to do something. We are start to hurry. That's good. So, and that's why my big idea, what I try to have, what I try to get some attention for, is to shift, or maybe to have another UN initiative besides the blue helmets. It is the green helmets. Green helmets that take care of the ecosystem of our planet. Harvesting water, digging rivers if we want to, planting trees. Maybe we need to do it from the highest level to the very lowest part of them. The strange thing is that if you're not feeling well and you take your temperature and it is just 0.5 degree more than our body temperature, we are sick, we have fever. The strangest thing that if the planet has fever, which it has, we don't take the same thing, although it's the same thing. So the connection between wildlife and health is a big one. Professor John Patz from the Wisconsin University, he said at the World Parks Conference in Sydney a few years ago that the wildlife sector could save more lives than the health sector could achieve. We need to think about that because this is about also an economic way of safeguarding wildlife. Our health depends on our nature. Nearby, far away, we really see there an opportunity that was there also, let's say, launched healthy parks, healthy people. The closer you are related to a park, how healthier you are in a group as an individual. So, I have to drink. Maybe it's time to look from a different point of view. Because it's our responsibility. So we need to make our breast wet ourselves. Huh? I have there, yes, we can. That's a former president, of course, and we need to be smart. We need to take all the brains we have and use that. And know, and really know, because I think this is an important message. Value is in the eye of the beholder. A polar bear doesn't know how valuable he is, or a tree frog, or a nightjar. But if people start to think that a polar bear is valuable, we start to take care. See what happened with a panda bear. Millions and millions of dollars are spent to keep that species alive. So value is in the eye of the beholder. We, human beings, value. So it's up to us to try to convince them to do something for our precious planet. And maybe we need to talk a little bit in a more, let's say, understandable language, not about the Latin name of species, but more about the water we drink, the food we eat, the healthy we are. Of course, based on the science you produce, because that's essential that we don't tell lies. But we need to make this connection with society because we think, and we can prove, I think, that this makes a big difference. For this province in Flanders, in Belgium, this is the most green province where you are, county, province. 40% of all the nature in the northern part of Belgium lies in this region, and 90% of all the species that occur in the northern part of Flanders occur in this region. So we have most beautiful species, and we have still, let's say, a natural connection, which is, of course, interesting to know, because we can work on it. We think we have golden eggs, but there is a condition. If you want to have golden eggs, you need a chicken who lays golden eggs, and you need to feed the chicken, because if you don't feed the chicken, she will not lay eggs anymore, and you will not have golden eggs anymore. And that's where a big political problem occurs, because every politician, they want to grab these golden eggs, so beautiful, but they don't feed the chicken. And that's wildlife. That's our natural heritage. We need to invest if we want to have golden eggs in the future. This region, where we are now, was dominated for 100 years by coal. At the highest point, 65,000 people were employed in the coal mines in this region. But in 1991, the last coal mine, the last colliery, was closed. A lot of people became unemployed. And with some friends, we thought, and I thought, that we could do the opposite. Because what did the government do? Oh, big problem, so many people unemployed. We would like to re-industrialize the region. And we said we have an alternative. Because luckily, this region was gifted with a lot of natural heritage. With beautiful, beautiful scenery, artificial. You've seen that maybe yesterday, or you'll see that. With still wild river, with beautiful animals, at the border with another country, cross-border, and you see all these typical. Also, what we see is that at a very short, let's say, distance, we see several types of nature occurring. Yeah, in the United States, you have to travel 1,000 kilometers to see a new, let's say, habitat type, where we see that in 50 kilometers from each other. So very close to each other, we see different types of nature, which is interesting scenery to combine with. We have our, let's say, our heritage, our castles. We are rich in castles and things like that. Wild River, told you that, with wild horses, at least, more or less wild horses. With cows, yeah, beautiful pictures with species which are really abundant and still important, not only at the country level, but also at the European level, very important. Also, we have our big five, if we want to, whatever, this communication, of course. But we see there are some beautiful species. And of course, the wolf entered 2 years ago, or 1.5 years ago, again in Belgium, as one of the last European countries. The wolf came back, and it came back by this region. Now it lives a little bit further, 20 kilometers further from here. If she is still alive, because there are some doubts now. She had some pups, but there is a possibility that she was shot. We are not sure yet, but at least the wolf comes back. Came back, and also from the upper, from the south now, in the Walloon part, in the south part of Belgium, we see wolves coming back to this region, which tells a little bit about wildlife. This is the picture that is most photographed when I give lectures. And it is an interpretation of the World Conference of Trend Watchers. 5 years ago, approximately 5 or 6 years ago, they had a world conference with the title, How to Become Successful. And the conclusion was, you can be successful if you become latte-proof. We all know latte macchiato from the coffee. But latte is here an acronym standing for local, authentic, traceable, trustworthy, and ethical. Now, if you look into what I am doing, working about wildlife, that's exactly what we can use. To be authentic, to be traceable, to be trustworthy, local. These things we try to incorporate and work with. All the bulk of what I told you about, let's say the global glance and the global overview, we try to design out of that, let's say, knowledge, a kind of a model, what we call the reconnection model, trying to reconnect society with wildlife, our natural heritage, with reconnection nature with nature, people with nature, business with nature, and policy with practice. You could also say science with nature. So all these reconnections, is between brackets because we need to reconnect because the connection is lost in this region. But if you go to other regions in South America, North America, Asia, there are still parts in the world where the connection is still there, and there we have to connect again. And that's the beauty of it. It's a simple model, but I think it's an interesting model to work with. Because there is a multiple return. There's a return on the natural capital, the social capital. I don't go too deep in that, the human capital, and there is a return on investment. I tell you the result of this national park at the end, and I'm nearly there. So happy hour will arise in a few moments. So, and if you work with these kind of models, it's not something that you say, oh, everyone can do that. No, it's really a profession. You have to have the smart skills to try to work with this model like the reconnection model. The reconnection model is now used, or parts of it are used across the world. Honeymoon Island in South Korea, Jeju Island is working with it. Also, I had with, for maybe people you know, in North America, John Jarvis of the National Park Service he was really keen on the model and would like to introduce that as a system, but then the elections came and, and John Jarvis has not the power and is now on pension and is working very hard in Berkeley University. I was visiting him in April this year. It's a bottom-up approach. It starts from bottom up, so with local community participation of locals to introduce and to invite them in, let's say, our natural heritage to talk about what are their desires, how can we try to achieve them, but always in the context of sustainability and with an, let's say, an eco-proof model. It's about how we eat, how we design, how we look to our heritage. We tried to become World Heritage, which we failed up to now, after 10 years of work, but we have another chance to go forward. And that's what we do. So within this framework, we said, let's now make nature sexy. All the countries in all the world, they have national parks, and Belgium didn't have one. Not a single national park in Belgium until 2006, because this is the first one. There is a reason why this happened, is because we had the First World War and the Second World War, and all the scientists after the Second World War, they went to Congo to see the elephants and the apes, and they didn't, let's say, look at our beautiful region ourselves. So that's why the first regional minister for wildlife in Flanders, so in part of Belgium, was 1981. So very late we came in with, let's say, our consciousness about wildlife. So we, after designing a cycling network, and I don't go too deep, that which became very, very successful. They call it here the eighth world wonder in this region. But then we said, let's make nature sexy. This brownish part is now the national park, 6,000 hectares, 6 square kilometers. Very tiny if you look in an international scale. But if you look in a Western European scale, it's, let's say, not at the bottom and not at the top. So let's a little bit less at the middle. So tiny for you, big for us. The average of a nature reserve in Flanders is 37 hectares. So this is 6,000 hectares, then you can compare how big it is, due to the Agency of Nature and Forestry, due to a lot of, let's say, investments and knowledge that came from scientific organizations and so on and so forth. So we worked about that. With the master plan, after 10 years of lobbying, remember, the collieries the coal mines were closed, so we could use some reuse some money that was left over to make our dream come true. And Martin Luther King, he never started with, I have a nightmare. He always thought, I have a dream. So I thought, let's go for that dream. The big, let's say, example that we had is, of course, Yellowstone Park, first national park in the world, 1872. And I will tell you a beautiful story now, North Americans. In 2016, we existed 10 years because it was established, our national park, in 2006. And I said to one of my staff, well, dig into history, because 2016 was also the centennial of the National Park Service in the United States. And I had a good contact with John Jarvis. Now, we came across with something interesting. At the basis of the first national park in the world, Yellowstone Park, lies Belgium. The Christian father Patz, he was then father in where now Yellowstone Park is located. He was working with Indians there, and he was so overwhelmed with wildlife that he started to lobby and went to politicians. It's more beautifully written down in the history books. So we could say the centennial and the decennial of the national parks, Belgium. So that's what a big example. Huh? And of course, the statue that is introduced here in Yellowstone Park years later after the opening has a big, let's say, inscription there for the benefit and the enjoyment of the people. Again, it refers to value is in the eye of the beholder. If people think Yellowstone is important, they will protect it. If people think, oh, Yellowstone Park, come on, it doesn't interest me, then it will be lost. So it's about the support we need to get. The other thing is that if you create a national park, we know now that national park is one of the 100 biggest brands in the world, like Apple and WWF and BMW. So big brands, national park is the same thing. UNESCO is another thing. So if you organize a national park, a lot of people will come, and they do come, also here. So they could, of course, accuse me from saying, you want to protect wildlife, more people come in, so you're destroying wildlife. What about the carrying capacity? What about over-tourism? Things like that. So we were thinking very hard, 10 years before the opening of the national park, what could be methodology to overcome that. That's what the reconnection model is all about. Just simply told, this is the national park, where what we could do is what 85% of all the national parks in the world do, is to locate all the visitor facilities in the park, with traffic jam and trash and all the things, or you can do it what we did. We located all our visitor facilities outside the park, very close to the local communities, where the money can be earned. It looks like this in a smart zoning, where the carrying capacity is taken care of. So we invite people to come to the visiting facilities outside the park. They have half a day to spend. Beautifully, you can walk on barefoot, look to the stars, whatever. And we know that just a few of them, of these that arrive here, go really into the national park, which is for free. The national park here is for free. It's different from the United States model. And what we see is that approximately 30%, even less, is going further to the national park. Of course, people like us, we all go to the wildlife because we are, of course, environmentalists, but most of the people, they want to have a nice day. The most beautiful story to tell there is that we have a local gateway to the national park where there is an insect center built beneath the ground, but there is also a barefoot path. A barefoot path where you pay, because the national park is for free, but all the things you do extra, you have to pay outside the park. So walking on barefoot, you have to pay for. Let's say $5 to put off your shoes and your socks and to just walk for 2 hours in yoga for your feet. Yeah? Things like that. And then you drink a cup of coffee or a pint of beer. The most beautiful thing was, we do research there, 150,000 people came there last year, and more than 90% of the people state that they went to the national park, and it was so beautiful, but they weren't in the national park. But we create the feeling, because all the communication is about the national park, of course, because the oak tree here is the same as the oak tree in the national park, of course. So we create that feeling, and this is our surface where we work in. It works interestingly good. We see it now also that it's working in projects where the over-tourism is taking place, so to give space to nature. Of course, there's a saying in Europe that all roads lead to Rome. I always say, but first they come through Belgium. So we need to find solutions, because the national park here was of course divided by a motorway. So the first thing we thought, let's green the motorway, was not possible. So it is about, let's say, the ecoducts, the green bridges, where now even snakes are passing and are reconnected again. The local gateways, I told you that we have now 5 local gateways and 1 main gateway that we developed to try to reconnect, to have that carrying capacity taken care of in our national park. This is the barefoot path where everything is thought of. This watching tower is built with wood of the harbor of Rotterdam. So it's a second life for wood. Even there, we go very, very sustainable in the complete development. So for the entire construction of the national park, every building, every stone we put or we made, there was another stone that we took away. So per saldo, there were 0 new construction. So it goes really deep. So I'm talking very fast, but it is more than that. This is the barefoot path, where you can get muddy as well if you want to. And then the main gateway to the national park. Were you there yesterday? Thursday. You will. Somewhere there yesterday. Okay. The main gateway to the national park, again, outside the national park. So the national park is over there. And this was the situation in 1991. Coal mines were still there, and now it looks like that. So you see those 2 pit heads, those 2 elevators. You see them here in a new situation, and you see them as the only remainings of the old situation. So it's about restoration, it's about really trying to have a new way of looking to create new, let's say, areas for wildlife as well. So again, bringing people in, bringing children in, bringing even Christian sisters in with beautiful hiking shoes. I like this picture. And with people making connections with, in this case, the River Maas, which is not that far from the national park. And we try to focus on the understanding that if you go into the wildlife, you enter a health center. Because we would like to promote the protected areas as the new health centers of the world. Healthy parks, healthy people. This is a picture of the Bay Area in the United States, which is very successful over there. Was there in April as well to check what they are doing. Really fantastic how they work. A lot of thousands of people work with this program in the Bay Area. And so this is about communication, of course. So there is no Wi-Fi in the park, but you will find a better connection. So try to avoid your smartphone in the national park and try to connect with wildlife. Last part is that, of course, you have to measure things. That's where what you do all day long, all year long, I think, is measuring things. Measuring things so that we can take the knowledge from the old and give it to the young and try to translate the science into the next generation in trying to make nature feeling us happy again. Not a problem, but a solution. This is what we do in the main gateway of the national park, which you will see. Okay, there's the next one. So also at the beginning of the national park, we made an arrangement with the Hasselt University to see what we could do, because we thought that if we are the hotspot of wildlife in the Flanders region, then we need to have a scientific partner that really helps us to bring all the science of the national park into, let's say, into our knowledge, and also so that we can translate that. And we made some first, let's say, agreements to start with an international field center, and that's why you're here for. Fantastic, that's a result of that. That's over there. And also to organize the Ecotron. And also, I don't think that there was a communication about the Ecotron yet. So the Ecotron is a scientific installation that does research on climate change and biodiversity and the relation between that. Natalie will tell you more about that. I just go really in a nutshell for that. But what we did, again, new, is that we not built the international, the field research station and the Ecotron in the campus of a university. We built the Ecotron in the main gateway of the national park for a specific region, because we would like to explain to all the visitors what is the research that is done. Is it about science popularization? What is done? How does it help the world forward in our, let's say, in our evolvement to a sustainable world? And what can I do myself if I want to do something for climate change or wildlife? So these connections were thought beforehand, now are under execution, and we have plans for the future as well. But Natalie will talk more about that. Last part is that what we see, and it's not only here in the Hoge Kempen National Park in Belgium, but what we see in Europe is that if you invest in the natural heritage, there is a positive correlation between local communities, a social cohesion, and an inclusive society and sustainable economy and jobs. I don't know if you know what the economic market is of people visiting protected areas. Cambridge University did research in 2015, and there, as a result, was that 8 billion visitors visit a protected area every year. So a lot of people are walking and hiking in a national park or a protected area, which, of course, underlines the fact that nature is important for us. But then, look there, spending $600 billion a year. So it's an economically interesting interesting number to work with. Because if you just look from theoretical point of view, a big chunk of people come and they spend a lot of money. The question is, how can we do it sustainable? How can we do also that we prevent the carrying capacity? Yeah? So that's the other thing, but it's a big market. We did the same research in the Hoge Kempen National Park. So what is now the value, the turnover of a national park and all the things that are related to the national park? And again, it's a big research that was done, but we have investments of more than 100 million euros in and in the surroundings of the national park. And we started with 8 million euros. So out of the 8, we made more than 100 million euros. It's a separate story. In 10 years' time, we were capable to invite 1.2 million people are coming on average to the national park every year. And the turnover is 191 million euros a year and 5,000 connected jobs. This is a translation. It's not the translation of wildlife. It's another translation. And what I learned over the years is that although I am an herpetologist and like butterflies and birds and of course herpetology, this is the language that politicians understand. The moment I started to say that the national park had a turnover of 191 million, I said, hey, please come to my office. Do you want a coffee? How does that work? And I'm still telling the story about a tree frog in my heart. But this is, let's say, the language that I use. And that's where I started with at the beginning. So, what we will do is that we will double the national park in the next, let's say, 2 decades. We go from 6,000 hectares to 12,000 hectares, which is a message to politicians, but also to Europe and the world that it is possible in a densely populated area to double your national park, twice as big, twice as beautiful, and twice as strong. And the big message in a bottle that you need to know is that it's about love for our planet that we do it, not about loss. Think globally, act locally, everybody knows that. There's a third part of the sentence, and change personally. Thank you so much.
Ignace. I'm pretty sure you will stay around
yes.
for the chat during a beer, or with a beer with him. I have one practical, since you're all here now, I have one practical notice which I just got from Marianne. Tomorrow morning the cleaning crew will come, so please put everything on your bed or somewhere else, but not on the floor, because they want to mop. That's one. And now it's from 10 past 8 to 10 past 9. Happy hour.
There's a question over there.
Can you take a couple questions now or not?
For me it's okay. Yeah.
Well, then it's quarter past.
Let's say.
Any questions, 2 or 3 questions for the speaker? Otherwise, you can chat with them in happy hour.
Hello. You talked about local solutions, you talked about local communities, you talked about the park here and the effort that is being made. When I came here and when I've been to other areas of the planet, I know that local communities have been conserving nature for centuries. The way I understand. Why?
No, well, it's a long story, but I will.
Not everywhere.
Not, they do it.
In parts.
In general,
In parts.
Yeah.
In parts of the world. Not everywhere.
Okay, correct.
So, it's interesting, and I thought I should add that, even apparently the national park seems to be some form of common. So, communities were here before the national park. Mm-hmm. So, I was curious to know how that gets, that whole system gets integrated.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Sorry, I was a little bit misled. But if you look into nature conservation in Belgium and northwestern Europe, you see 2 different types that you also see in North America. Of course, that you have state-owned wildlife protection, the National Park Service like that. And then you have the organizations, the NGOs like Sierra Club, things like that, WWF and so on. You have the same thing in Flanders and in Belgium. So you have the private nature conservation organization, and you have the state-owned national parks, for instance, like this one. People always took care about nature because out of history we had common lands. I think that's also a principle or a thing that you know in the United States, where there is common land where everybody could get the gratitude for. But what we see across the development of this region, that we let nature be because of a lot of things. Economic system changed, so farming became less and less interesting. So it was there. It was not managed anymore because the nature system, it's interesting maybe to know, to let you know, the wildlife conserving in this part of Europe and in most parts of Europe is not, let's say, virgin wildlife. It is conserving a system of farming from, let's say, 200 years ago. So that's the type of land that we have, and if you don't conserve that, if you don't manage it in the right way, of course it grows into forest. This is, of course, our next phase. So what we saw here is that the nature conservation organizations, the private ones, they came in the 1950s. That's very late, the 1950s of the former centuries. And also the agencies came then forward to take care of this land. But nobody was interested in the community. What is the relation with the community? Because a lot of people who are living in these surroundings, they go and they walking and hiking every day for 10 years, for 20 years. But it were the locals, and they never, let's say, from the government point of view, and also from the nature conservation point of view, at the let's say the former decades, they were never, let's say, taking into account that with the support of people, you can increase the amount of nature you have because you have then support, public support, and you can grow and find new opportunities for sponsoring and so on and so forth. This is a recent thing that happened. So for the national park over here, it was there for decades. It was there for decades, and I think you had, before we started, you had like 40 parking lots. 40 parking lots, now you have 6. So because on those parking lots you had all problems, your car was, car radio was stolen and things like that. So it's about these kind of things where we try to convince and the agency and the politicians that if you work on wildlife, and also because of wildlife, because at the end of the day I don't want to have €1 more, but I would like to have some butterflies more. This is really my concern. Of course I sell it as economic, but the real concern for me and my colleagues is more butterflies, more birds, more ecosystem, and that's the reason why we do it. And that's what you see now, that taking people, values in the eye of the beholder, into account in your process to get more support helps us now that we have had elections in Flanders. So the new governments and new politician government is made now. So we are now having a lot of power to try to get new goals for wildlife in the future. And we couldn't do that beforehand. I don't know if I answered your question.
Not exactly, because I'm referring to the tradition of commons.
Yes?
The land was managed under traditional governance systems. And the way I understand it, there was something like this here, and that's why the forests, the wildlands were used to make national parks.
Okay. No, it is partly so. But here there was another thing that is related to the coal mines. So the coal mines were huge over here, and they needed a lot of pine trees to help them to make these what do you call it? These tell it again. Constructing the shafts. So a lot of land was then planted by trees, and that's because of the coal mines closed in 1991. It was still there. Not, no, not correct, not correct. It is sometimes it was private, sometimes it was from the community, sometimes it was from landlords, whatever. And so it is both.
There was communal land.
There was.
Okay, and there was traditional government system.
There was.
Okay.
But it was not the system. It was not, let's say, the overarching system.
I'm not referring to this system. I'm referring to that specific part of the system.
Yeah.
And I was curious as to how that, since we talked about local solutions,
Yeah.
since we talked about local people, how that is integrated into the whole process,
Yeah.
which I understand was successfully integrated with something.
Yeah.
And I was curious.
I will come back to you because what you see, because it goes really deep into what type of national park we are. Because you have a lot of different type in national parks. In this national park, no people are living. And all the, let's say, the constructions who are there, still there in the national park, were not related to the, let's say, the objectives of the national park will go out. Even industrial zones will go out. So it's a completely different system than other national parks in Europe which you have, where communities are living in the national parks, where local communities live in the national park. That's not here, but I will tell you that with a beer. Huh? So because, because I will give the opportunity to somebody else. Yeah.
So one of the issues we face with national parks in the United States is the value of the land outside the national park skyrockets. And that displaces the working class people that are around the park that are also needed for the jobs in the park. And so I wondered how, since you have a newer national park and you're able to see that example, how you have been able to plan for protecting the working class folks that are in the area around the national park and to support their needs.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I don't know if I have the entire answer. What we see is, of course, that due to the national park, a lot of new jobs occurred directly into nature, maintaining the nature. Indirectly, let's say, the most successful is tourism. But also what we see is that new businesses, hotels, B&Bs came in. And it's the reason why that it is interesting is that we organize the facilities outside the park. So we went to the mayors of all these local communities, like you see. I will refer to that in a minute. So we went to the mayors and say, hey, what we would like to do is our national park facility to build in the really downtown your local community as a visitor center. Are you agreeing with that? In the beginning, they say, yeah, but you're a green guy. Huh? So is it good for us? Because stay in your nature reserve, stay in the national park. But once they were convinced and saw that the butcher and the bakery, and they were really increasing in their turnovers, it was there an agreement. I did some research in Yosemite National Park to see what is the success of a national park and how far is the reach of that. So San Francisco nowadays, every morning, I don't know if you know, but every morning 100 buses start at 4 o'clock in the morning, driving from hotel to hotel, picking up people who pay $120, I think, nowadays, then to take them to Yosemite National Park, which is 270 or 300 kilometers from California, from San Francisco City, every day again. And what happened then, what struck me, is they drive with their bus into the national park, going to the hotspots. People step down the bus, and like Americans do, they say, oh, this is awesome. They take a picture, a selfie, back on the bus to El Capitan, and so on and so forth. What struck me was what happened in these local villages before entering the national park. The scenery is beautiful because often the landscape is beautiful because it's an artificial line that once said, this is the national park and this is not the national park. So what we do with our model is include that in the idea of the national park. And this is the big, let's say, change, because now it's not just a national park, which is the design, the line of the design. It is an entire regional approach. What we see here, that's why we double the national park. We have local communities say, we want to have our national park extended. We want to be part of it. In other regions in Europe still have, we would like to get rid of the national park because all those green guys. So we see that we make a success of that, and that's trying to bring value in the eye of the beholder. And that's what John Jarvis of the National Park Service was so keen on, say, hey, why don't we organize our visitor facilities not in just the local communities outside the park, because of carrying capacity and things like that. Last question, and then we go for a drink. I'm thirsty.
Yeah, this may be a drink-related question. First of all, thank you. This was fabulous. You were talking about Edison and designed obsolescence with the light bulb, and you also talked about the desire and the aspiration that we will shift to a society that produces long-term goods rather than short-term disposable goods. And that requires not just public demand, but it requires corporate commitment. And so in the United States, we just 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a group of 198 companies that just announced, or executives that just announced that they were committed to recognizing that corporates had a responsibility beyond the shareholders. I know Unilever in Europe has a really strong corporate social
responsibility,
yeah, CSR. And I wondered if you could talk more about that, because some of the change that we want to see is really going to be driven, I think, a lot through corporate commitment, and I wondered what you're seeing.
Yeah, interesting question. What we see is that into the change from the corporate side, the point of view, is the, let's say, those who are convinced, and you don't have to do anything because they are changing rapidly, because they know we are winning if we are on the right side of the story, of the history. The other side is more difficult. Huh? So how can we convince, let's say, entrepreneurs to do the right thing? Well, I did, and first at a very local level, and which helped me a lot also in the support, is that I think for over 30 years now, more than 30 years, I'm always going to the annual meetings of those corporate, let's say, networks. And 35 years ago, they said, who is that guy? He doesn't run a business. He's a nature conservationist doing frogs and lizards and snakes. So what I was trying to build in that, because you build, this is a good lesson, you build your network and these things when you don't need it. Because if you build your network, if you need it, yeah, then you're suspicious. So I still do that at the local level, going to all those meetings, listening to bank directors and whatever they are, and try to talk to them and then it's easy to say, okay, in the next year we would like to have your annual meeting near the national park or in the national park or just a hike in the national park. And you see that we start now to have a kind of a broad, let's say, coalition of CEOs who are very keen on the idea of a national park and of extending the national park. At the let's say, the level of Flanders, Belgium, there you see that there's another principle that we use there. That's where we find these, let's say, these ambassadors, CEO ambassadors, and there's an organization called The Shift, Shifting into the Future, where we say, now you invite 2 of your friends, CEOs, to come and then to work on that. Last thing, but not least, and then I really stop, is that if it doesn't work, you need to mirror yourself. Because what I told you in the beginning, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm also a climate leader, an ambassador for Al Gore. And if you see in the climate story, Belgium plays a very bad role as well, because we signed all the agreements where we're not doing it. We're not fulfilling our objectives. So I sued the Belgian government. So I sued the Belgian government with now 65,000 co-plaintiffs. It's a difficult story, but again, you have to be honest and say, hey, Belgium, signing and saying, yes, we're going to battle climate change, but you don't fulfill your objectives. You have to take them on their responsibility. So we start, I think 4 years ago, climate litigation, which we crowdfund. We need to find 350,000 euros a year, because lawyers are very expensive. But again, we built a movement. 65,000 co-plaintiffs is one of the bigger cases in Europe now. And again, we have a baseline, and it is out of love for the planet. And I'm willing to lose my case. Because if I lose my case, I hope that Belgium fulfills its objectives. It's a simple thing. It's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. So it's building network. Building network you do in times when you don't need it, because that's investment, of course. And if it doesn't work, you have to take another step. And then you have to be open as well in that, because I work a lot with governments, really a lot, in the national park also. But then suing them, you can imagine, it was in the beginning tense. But I'm always open. Say, come on, fulfill your objections, and then we are friends. Let's do so. Okay, let's have a drink. Yeah.